The situation in Panama tonight is bad and getting worse. Open attacks on the opposition candidates. There's a new round of Soviet-American talks on nuclear arms scheduled, and Boston's night of airplane terror.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The violence in Panama escalated sharply this evening when government goons attacked candidates opposed to General Manuel Noriega, possibly killing two of their bodyguards, although that has not been confirmed. Opposition presidential candidate Guillermo Endara and two other opposition candidates were beaten with iron pipes, but apparently their injuries are not serious. The attacks came during this demonstration in the streets of Panama City, protesting that the presidential election had been stolen by Noriega. Government forces rolled out water cannons. And uniformed troops were present as well, but the attacks were carried out by armed civilians. Panamanian officials are not allowing us to transmit our television reports from Panama tonight, so we have NBC's Ed Rabel on the telephone from Panama City. And Ed, there are reports at the Pentagon tonight that Endara now has been arrested. Do you know anything about that in Panama City?
We cannot confirm that right now, but we do know that Guillermo Endara was hit with a tire iron on the head, was taken to a hospital, treated, and released. Afterwards, he held a news conference in which he called the attackers government goons. There are those unconfirmed reports that he was arrested. We saw him leave the hospital, get into his van, and make a quick run away from the hospital. We saw riot police attempt to surround his car at the time, but we don't know what his whereabouts are right now.
What about those other opposition candidates that were attacked as well, Ed? What's their condition tonight?
During the attack, one of the vice presidential candidates, Guillermo Ford, was beaten and arrested. We don't know whether he still is under arrest. Two of Ford's bodyguards, we are told, were said to have been killed during the attack when 50 of these so-called dignity battalions or government goons emerged from a side street. The other vice presidential candidate, Arias Calderon, was also beaten.
And the condition of the bodyguards, we have reports that maybe as many as two of them were killed.
That's correct. We have unconfirmed reports that two of the Ford's bodyguards, while attempting to protect him from the attack, died when the dignity battalions fired into the crowd.
All right, thank you very much. Ed Rabel in Panama City tonight. All of this, as you might expect, is being closely monitored at the White House, and when word of this latest round of violence reached President Bush, he sent his spokesman to the press briefing room.
President Bush condemns the violence now underway in Panama. General Noriega has thwarted the desire of the Panamanian people for democracy by conducting a fraudulent election. He has now escalated this to include violence against opposition leaders, including Mr. Endara. This action underscores that General Noriega does not have the interests of the Panamanian people at heart.
The question remains, of course, what does President Bush do besides condemn this violence? Well, there are a number of options. And NBC's John Cochran is at the White House tonight. John, I gather that at the moment they're emphasizing the diplomatic option rather than the military choice.
Absolutely, Tom. The president has been on the phone this afternoon trying to line up leaders in Latin America against Noriega, as, for example, the president of Panama has already done. The president, down the line, might ask Latin American leaders to join with the United States in a diplomatic and even an economic boycott of Noriega. And, of course, if the president had to resort to the final option, military intervention, he'd want support in Latin America, Tom.
Is he conferring with Defense Secretary Cheney very closely throughout all of this?
Dick Cheney's been here this afternoon, but there's great reluctance to go for the military option. Nobody in Congress, or very few in Congress, are in favor of that, and certainly in the area of Latin America, people don't want the Yankees going in there with their troops. In Panama itself, opposition leaders, of course, are not calling for the United States troops to join in their fight against Noriega, Tom.
Thank you very much. John Cochran is at the White House tonight, and standing by right now at the Pentagon is our military affairs correspondent, Fred Francis. And Fred, there are reports as well that American servicemen are being harassed in the Canal Zone and that the dependents are in ever greater danger. What's the response of the Pentagon to all of that?
Well, they're real concerned here, Tom. Reports have been coming in all afternoon. The first one, that one U.S. serviceman was seriously beaten, that was confirmed. The second report that 3 U.S. servicemen were arrested and then later released without being harmed. And now yet another report that 2 United States military attachés assigned to the American embassy down there have been arrested this afternoon and have not been released so far. All this changes the alert status and the safety conditions for the Americans there. And the safety condition was changed to Condition Charlie late today. Now that means that all American soldiers and their dependents were ordered this afternoon not to go into the public areas of Panama, to stay on their bases. And those Americans, some 3,000 who live outside the Panama bases, the American bases in Panama, are to stay in their homes. Now there is a plan which may be put into effect tomorrow to move those 3,000 American dependents onto the bases. But tonight, the alert status is one of high caution.
Thank you very much, Fred Francis at the Pentagon for NBC News tonight. And on another front, the United States and the Soviet Union today tentatively agreed to resume their talks on reducing long-range nuclear weapons. Those talks begin next month in Geneva. These are not the short-range missiles at issue in Europe. The agreement was reached as Secretary of State James Baker began talks with Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze. This was Baker's first visit to Moscow, and he said he was very pleased with the way that the talks began. Also on the agenda, Central America. Shevardnadze said there was a good chance of finding ways to bring peace to that region. And in China today, another remarkable concession by the communist government that the mass demonstrations there for democracy are now having an effect. As thousands of college students on bicycles staged a march on wheels to demand greater freedom of the press, the government announced that it will allow more open reporting of corruption cases. It said this move was prompted by recent demands made by the students. And in Iran today, Parliament Speaker Rafsanjani said that he was misunderstood last week, that he never urged Palestinians to murder Americans, Britons, or Frenchmen in retaliation for Arabs killed in Israeli-occupied territories. He added that he would never condone the killing of innocent civilians. In Beirut today, innocent civilians were victims as very heavy shelling killed at least 10 people and wounded 89. One shell hit the U.S. ambassador's residence, causing extensive damage but no injuries. Also coming up here tonight on NBC Nightly News, a wild night in the skies over Boston, and Robert Hager with the latest warning on the sun, skin, and the dangers of cancer, how to deal with it.
$15 million,
and Mike Jensen tonight on the buying frenzy in the art world, fed in part by the hard-driving auction houses.
$500,000 I have. Sold $43,500,000. Thank you very much.
Terror in the air. That phrase has a whole new meaning tonight after what happened last night in Boston. A man armed with a rifle stole a small plane and buzzed the city repeatedly, raking it with gunfire. None of those bullets hit anyone, but as NBC's Cassandra Clayton reports now, they did touch off a panic.
Get yourself on the cover. Jimmy, get out.
For 3 hours, the pilot terrorized the Boston area, randomly firing a rifle from the plane.
I looked up, and there was a small white plane and no lights on, and that seemed kind of strange, and it sure seemed strange to see a lot of bullet casings landing around my feet.
The plane swooped over Boston and Logan Airport perhaps 24 times. The control tower was evacuated. All flights halted for about an hour.
It was almost like watching an aerobatic show, and your heart was pounding because you didn't know it was going to hit anything.
At one point, the plane flew under a bridge.
I saw her fly over the Big Mystic, over in Everett, over by Everett, there over the water, and then it came back underneath the bridge.
The clearance on that bridge is 135 feet. Police say 42-year-old Alfred Hunter's bizarre crime spree began at 9:30 last night when he is believed to have shot and killed his estranged wife. Using 2 stolen cars, Hunter drove to this airport 30 miles north of Boston, where he then commandeered a small plane, pointing his rifle at flight instructor Rob Golder.
Don't try anything stupid. I already killed someone tonight.
Hunter took off, circled southern New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts, then flew south past Boston and back up again, circling the city. At one point, it appeared he was about to land at Logan Airport, but...
Here he comes again.
Finally, Hunter did land, with about 5 minutes of fuel left. He was apprehended after a brief struggle with police. Police recovered shell casings on the ground and found several spent and live rounds in the plane. Several buildings were reportedly hit by gunfire. Hunter was arraigned this morning, charged with murder and armed robbery. Police say his reign of terror may have been triggered by a court sentence he received yesterday. 2 years probation for assault and battery on his pregnant wife. Hunter was sent for observation at a state mental hospital. Cassandra Clayton, NBC News, Boston.
And in Washington, D.C., President Bush's plan for bailing out the savings and loan industry was rejected today by the House Ways and Means Committee. Despite the president's threat of a veto, Democrats pushed through a different plan, one that includes all bailout costs within the budget. If approved, that would increase the budget deficit over the next 3 years by $50 billion. The new federal drug czar, William Bennett, is on record as urging that first-time drug offenders be taught self-control and discipline by being sent to prisons run like military boot camps. Well, as NBC's Lisa Myers reports tonight, such prisons redefine the phrase hard time.
The Mississippi State Penitentiary, a boot camp for nonviolent first offenders. At least 8 states have similar programs, some known as shock incarceration. The principle is always the same.
When I tell you to jump, you're going to say, "How high, sir," aren't you?
Prisoners are up at 4 a.m. for a day of intense physical exercise, hard labor, and military drills. Those who break the rules do extra push-ups.
1, 2, 3, 8, 1, 2.
Bennett sees this as a good way to teach a lesson to small-time drug dealers and even casual drug users.
You're saying to them, look, you messed up, you made a mistake, you have made a serious offense against society, but we're going to give you a chance. We're going to give you an experience which is going to be good for your character. You're going to learn how to read, you're going to learn how to salute the flag, and keep your nose clean.
Inmates go to class and to therapy sessions, but they say the key word is discipline.
In anything you do, you have to have the discipline. I think that's the most important part.
I'm sure that I never want to go through this again, so I can pretty much control myself what I do.
Many states claim that graduates of these programs are less likely to commit another crime than those sent to prison. Experts say it's too early to be sure of that. But boot camps cost less than traditional prisons.
These men are going to be in prison for 5 months, whereas someone with a similar charge who's not sentenced to this program might spend 2 to 3 years in prison. So we're saving taxpayers quite a lot of money. It's a real good buy.
Still, some experts say putting millions of drug users in boot camps is extreme, and members of Congress have begun to criticize Bennett.
This drug czar so far has only come out with jails and police. I haven't heard Bennett talk too much about providing education and training and job skills.
Bennett says he has emphasized punishment because this country has been so lenient in the past, and because no drug war can succeed until everyone gets the message that using drugs is a crime. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Washington.
The Exxon Corporation announced today it is now beefing up its cleanup of the big oil spill in Alaska, going from 3,400 cleanup workers to 5,000. However, Coast Guard Commandant Paul Yost said he still thinks that it will be almost impossible for Exxon to clean up all of the oil that had spilled from 300 miles of shoreline by the company's September deadline.